Daniel's weeks. The week concept. A week is a set of 7. Normally is understood as a set of days or weeks, but it can also mean a set of jubilees, 49 years, a sabbatical cycle, or Shemitah cycle, consists of 7 years, and each year in the Jewish lunisolar. Therefore, a 7-year sabbatical cycle contains approximately 2,471 to 2,485 days, depending on the specific length of the years involved. Breakdown of the Shemitah cycle. The Shemitah year. The Shemitah is the 7th year of a 7-year agricultural cycle, also known as the Sabbath of the land. Lunisolar calendar. The Jewish calendar is lunisolar, meaning it is regulated by the positions of both the sun and the moon. Year lengths. A typical year in this calendar has 12 alternating lunar months of 29 or 30 days, with the total number of days being 353, 354, or 355 days. Calculating the total. To find the total number of days in a 7-year cycle, you would multiply the average number of days in a year by 7. According to Encyclopaedia Britannica, the origin of the Jewish calendar can no longer be accurately traced. Some scholars suggest that a solar year prevailed in ancient Israel, but no convincing proofs have been offered, and it is more likely that a lunisolar calendar similar to that of ancient Babylonia prevailed in ancient Israel. In late Second Temple times, 1st century BCE to 70 CE, calendrical matters were regulated by the Sanhedrin, or Council of Elders, at Jerusalem. The testimony of 2 witnesses, who had observed the new moon, was ordinarily required to proclaim a new month. Leap years were proclaimed by a council of 3 or more rabbis with the approval of the Nasi, or president, of the Sanhedrin. With the decline of the Sanhedrin, calendrical matters were decided by the Palestinian Patriarchate, the official heads of the Jewish community under Roman rule. Jewish persecution under Constantius II reigned 337 to 361, and advances in astronomical science led to the gradual replacement of observation by calculation. According to Hai ben Shira, died 1038, the head of a leading Talmudic academy in Babylonia, Hillel II, a Palestinian patriarch, introduced a fixed and continuous calendar in 359 CE. At the time of Daniel and of Jesus, the Hebraic year was most probably understood as having 354 days, because the years with an additional month. The leap years were considered to be different, because they were only proclaimed after a complex process. I truly believe that the Shemitah cycle, or the weeks used in Daniel's and other prophets, and also Jesus, were 7 mean Hebraic years of 354 days. The 70 weeks calculation, in Daniel 9:24-27. Daniel 9:25. Know therefore and understand, that from the going out of the word to restore and build Jerusalem to the coming of an anointed one, a prince, there shall be 7 weeks. Then for 62 weeks it shall be built again with squares and moat, but in a troubled time. The going out of the word is usually interpreted as the date of the decree from Artaxerxes, I. 445, or 444 BC, stated by Nehemiah in verse 2:18, which gave Nehemiah permission and resources to rebuild Jerusalem's walls and city. We can assume that it took some time to get the letters and resources, so we will use the AD 444 as the reference year, so knowing that a Shemitah week is made of 354 days, the mean Hebraic year. Let's do the calculations. Let's calculate step by step. Now, moving 468 years forward from 445 BC, times from 444 plus 468.3 equals 24.3 years. That is around AD 24, maybe later in that year, or AD 25. Result. The 69 weeks prophecy reaches approximately AD 24, using the mean Hebrew year of 354 days. Knowing that historians say that Jesus' birth date was around 4 to 6 years BC, we can state that Jesus was baptized at the age of 28 to 30 years old. That fits perfectly in the historian's knowledge of the start of Jesus' ministry. To calculate the 70 weeks using the same method we get with one more week, the prophecy reaches approximately AD 31. Adding the 4 to 6 years for correcting the age of Jesus, we get 35 to 37 years old, maybe even 38 But we know that Jesus did not live that long, because he was crucified 5 years before, AD 28, at the age of 32 to 34 years old. That is, he was crucified at the middle of the week, and what happened at the end of the week, according to many Christians' beliefs until the 17th century, it was the stoning of Stephen that occurred about AD 31 to AD 33. But there's another much important event that took place about the same time. Saul's Paul conversion in the road of Damascus, after a spiritual intense encounter with Jesus. Many scholars point to dates between AD 33 and AD 36, but according to some it could have happened just 3 to 4 years after Jesus' crucifixion. So it is possible that it happened a half of a week of mean Hebraic years later. There is consensus that Jesus died on the cross at the age of 33 years old, but it is mentioned in much literature that he started preaching or was baptized by AD 29. But if we add the 4 to 6 years for the age adjustment, we would get to 33 to 35 years of age, which is completely off the timing most people assume. So despite the lacking rigorous information on the dates, I would assume that is perfectly possible to fit the 70th week between Jesus' baptism and the conversion of Saul, Paul, or Stephen's stoning. According to my interpretations, the most probable years of the most relevant events would be AD 24, 27 to 30 years old, Jesus' baptism, AD 28, 31 to 34 years old, Jesus' crucifixion, AD 31, 3 to 4 years after Jesus' resurrection, Stephen's stoning or Paul's conversion. The difficulties in establishing the right years may rise from the confusion between the Hebraic years and Gregorian years, and also from the inferred age of Jesus at crucifixio that is often associated with the Gregorian true year. That is why many sources refer the year AD 33 as the crucifixion year, and never refer to the years AD 28-29, if we attend to Jesus' true birth date. If the crucifixion date were to be AD 33, then Jesus would have 37 to 39 years old at the time. However, the historical context of Pontius Pilate's governorship and the high priest Caiaphas's tenure helps to place the event of Jesus' crucifixion within a specific period, generally between AD 28 and AD 33. So it makes sense to accept AD 28 as the most probable year, despite knowing that it is possible to be 1 or even 2 years later. Analyzing Daniel's verse, we can see the oddness of referring to the 69 weeks as 7 plus 62. If we delve on this and knowing that it took 52 days to walls to be rebuilt, it makes perfectly sense that the 7 weeks can be interpreted also as being a regular week of 7 days, because 52 days are in fact 7 weeks, not reaching 8. But then we can assume also that we can look into other interpretations using different sets of 7 weeks. We can assume that can be 7 jubilees, 49 years cycles. That is a set of 7 years. So let's try this and see where it gets us. 7x 49 plus 62 times 7 is equal to 777 years. That would get us into the Gregorian year of plus AD 309. That is not a known important year. The only relevant event was Christians in Egypt found refuge in the desert, which led to the development of monasticism and Coptic writing. But looking at only the number 777, what we get is the divine signature, stating the divinity of Jesus, equaling him to God. Let us now study one of the most controversial verse in the Bible, Daniel's 9.27. Let us use the Masoretic text, for the Jews are not into recognizing Jesus, so if it still reveals Jesus, that is a sign of its credibility. And he shall confirm a covenant with many for 1 week, and in the middle of the week, he shall cause sacrifice and offering to cease, and upon the wing of abominations shall come one who makes desolate, and until the end, and that which is decreed, it shall be poured out upon the desolator. So we see that he shall confirm, not establish, a covenant. So it is not a new covenant, it's an existing covenant, and this is to be fulfilled during a week, 7 years, and in the middle of the week he shall cause sacrifice and offering to cease. That is what Jesus has done. He confirmed the previous covenant, not a word or dot would be changed, but he did it with many, the apostles, not with just one person like the previous covenants were made, Adam, Abraham, Moses or Jacob. And as presented before, the last apostle, Paul, met Jesus about 3 to 4 years after his crucifixion, according with my research and interpretation. And he also ceased the sacrifices and offerings by his own ultimate sacrifice. All the following were void of meaning to God, and he was desolated and killed by his people. An abomination of desolation. But he also desolated the temple, as he became the temple himself. The abomination made God to be in extreme grief and indignation, and he showed just that by torn the veil that separated and guarded the Holy of Holies, that is God himself, inside the temple. The torn of one's garments is a biblical way of expressing inner turmoil. And a Hebrew word translated as wing can also mean mantle, cover or garment. The temple veil was the cover or the garment that protected and separate the Holy of Holies, God's place, and its removal made God available to anyone desolating the temple sacrificial system. Let's look to previous verses in order to understand who is doing what. Again from the Masoretic we get 9:25 Know and understand, from the going out of the word to restore and to build Jerusalem until Messiah, the Prince, shall be 7 weeks and 62 weeks, it shall be built again, with plaza and moat. But in troubled times, here we must look to something particular. It is written until Messiah, the Prince, so the Messiah is the Prince. But Jesus was not a prince. The word prince can mean a leader or guide, spiritual or, most commonly, a military or political leader. My interpretation is that this verse show us the two missions or roles of Jesus, first as Messiah, the anointed one, the spiritual guide or even leader. Second as a military leader, a real prince. The first and the second coming are revealed. First as a spiritual savior and after as a military savior, and then we can confirm, just that in the next verse, and after the 62 weeks, Messiah shall be cut off, and shall have nothing, and the city and the sanctuary shall be destroyed by the people of a prince who is to come. Its end shall be with a flood, and until the end there shall be war, desolations are decreed. Where it is translated as the people of a prince, it can be translated as well as the people of the coming prince if we assume the later, and knowing that the last verse introduced us the Messiah as prince, we can assume that this prince is Jesus as military leader, God of hosts. These verse shows us again the double role of Jesus, first being cut, and being innocent, not for him but for us, and after as the prince, the leader, who is to come and destroy the city and the sanctuary with his army of saints and angels, the Lord of hosts. I know that almost all people don't see it this way, but throughout the Bible, and looking at God's curses on Israel in Deuteronomy 28 and in most of the prophecies, we can see that Jerusalem and Israel are to face the wrath of God in the last days. And as we know, he will come like a flood. It will be like in Noah's time. And also like a thief. And don't forget that the antiChrist is to be worshipped in a temple, and that Jesus is the temple himself. So it is very likely that he will destroy this holy place where people worship a false god. And there shall be a war between the antichrist armies and the heavenly armies of Jesus, and at the end there will be a desolate place and city. Remember that Jesus said that people should run away to the mountains and leave all things behind, when they saw the abomination standing in the holy place, the sanctuary, where the or the image of the beast is placed and worshipped. Once again we get the idea of a sudden event, like a flood, maybe because the armies of the Lord of hosts will be great in numbers and might. And if we know that the hour of God's wrath is the most terrible event that would kill all humanity if the days weren't cut short, and Jesus, as we see below, said that will be a great distress unequaled and never to be unequaled again. it is clear that he is talking about his coming as God and leader and avenger and punisher. Let us now look at the prophecy about the end times and the abomination of desolation foretold by Daniel and mentioned by Jesus in Matthew 24:15-21. So when you see standing in the holy place the abomination that causes desolation, spoken of through the prophet Daniel, let the reader understand. 16 Then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. 17 Let no one on the housetop go down to take anything out of the house. 18 Let no one in the field go back to get their cloak. 19 How dreadful it will be in those days for pregnant women and nursing mothers. 20 Pray that your flight will not take place in winter or on the Sabbath. 21 For then there will be great distress, unequaled from the beginning of the world until now, and never to be equaled again. This abomination of desolation is an event related to the end times, but it mimics the first, revealed in 9:27, as once more God's people desolate God in a way that is abominable to him. The other verse that talks about the abomination of desolation is Daniel's 12:11, and from the time that the daily sacrifice shall be taken away, and the abomination that maketh desolate set up, there shall be 1,290 days. Here Daniel informs us that there is a period of 1,290 days that will start with the removal or theft, something that is taken, of the daily, or perpetual, sacrifice, and will end with the abomination that causes desolation to be set up, probably the antichrist, or the beast worship as God, desolating God, apostasy. People generally think that this verse is referring to a time where the daily sacrifices have been reintroduced and will be ceased by the antichrist action. But nowhere in the Bible the resume of sacrifices is prophesied to happen, except in Ezekiel where he prophesied, during the period leading up to and following the destruction of the first temple, with his visions of a future restored temple occurring around 573 BCE. His later vision described a completely new temple and a spiritual community for the Jewish exiles, which became a template for the Second Temple period, 516 BCE 70 CE, but was never built as described in his book. The sacrifices was ceased by the eternal sacrifice of Jesus that made the old sacrificial system void of meaning as previously stated. So the daily sacrifice was replaced by the eternal sacrifice of Jesus. Not that Jesus is perpetually sacrificed, but that his sacrifice has perpetual meaning and effect. It was the ultimate sacrifice. What Daniel is saying is that Jesus' ultimate sacrifice is to be taken away by the reintroduction of sacrifices, or by a sacrifice that mimics his, and that is an abomination. The taking away of the eternal sacrifice of Jesus is also revealed in Daniel 8:11-12, and extolled himself against the prince of the host, from whom the daily sacrifice was taken away, and the place of his sanctuary was cast down. So the regular, continual offering, the eternal sacrifice of Jesus, was taken away and forsaken by the iniquity, or transgression, made against the chief of the heavenly host. Jesus as Lord of hosts. It is clear to me that this refers to the end of the eternal sacrifice of Jesus by transgression, or iniquity of the Antichrist himself, or by the work of his Spirit. As Paul said that it was already operating at his time. Remember that the Antichrist is interested in deceiving people and in dishonoring Jesus, so he will not cease any sacrifices. People are going to expect that to happen, but instead he will resume sacrifices, and offerings made to honor and worshipping him instead. With that in mind, we must look for the reintroduction of sacrifices as the starting point of the 1,290 days of the abomination of desolation. In July 8, the red heifer was killed in a rehearsal of a ritual ceremony meant to clean or purify the priests that are to attend to the sacrifices that are to be resumed in the altar of the future temple. But if we look into this rehearsal, we will see how odd it was. The most important proof that this was a real sacrifice is what Byron Stinson, the man responsible for locating and transporting these rare cattle to Israel, recently provided Charisma News an important update that directly addresses this concern. Out of the 5, 3 are still pure and could still be used for the ceremony. 2 have started growing a couple of white or black hairs that disqualify them for the ceremony. They are still very good animals that could produce another red heifer, Stinson explains. Also, there are another people who said when asked, "What will be done with the disqualified red heifers?" While the 5 red heifers flown to Israel in 2022 were quite costly, we can be assured that any cow that becomes disqualified will not simply become an expensive steak. Those that are disqualified will be used in the Israeli breeding program, as they still maintain superb qualities. Also, there has been many disinformation about this rehearsal, with the Temple Institute stating that it was done somewhere in Samaria and on July 1st instead. But we cannot find a video showing the rehearsal posted previously to July 8th. There are some videos posted on July 8th and 9th reporting that the ceremony was done at July 8th. July 1st is misinformation spread to fool people. The ceremony was made according to Numbers 19, but also to Deuteronomy 21. According to the Torah, it doesn't need to be done at Olives Mount. It was done in Shiloh, where the tabernacle stood for long before the temple was built. This one video was posted on July 8th and has images from July 3th, and states that there were still 5 heifers at the time, and there is no mention about one being killed on July 1st. This red heifer was the 10th red heifer to be killed in a purification ceremony since the first one performed attended by Eliezer back in Moses' time in the desert. There are many Midrashic Jews who believe in the atonement of all sins, and in the coming of the Messiah after the sacrifice of the 10th heifer. No one knows if the one which was killed was not a kosher. Only the ones who have seen her closely. So, it would be easy to use this, probably, perfect heifer as the 10th to bring the Mashiach and eternal atonement, because it wouldn't be possible to do it in plain sight of everybody, including Western and Christian media. In Hebrews 9 verses 11 to 28, Paul highlights the superiority of Christ's sacrifice to Old Testament purification rituals, including the ashes of a red heifer, by explaining that while the old sacrifices could sanctify for the cleansing of the flesh, Hebrews 9 verse 13, Christ's blood provides a far greater redemption. It seems that Paul was already foreseeing a future event where the ashes of an heifer would be used to replace the eternal sacrifice of Jesus. In this article published by Joseph Leonard posted on June 24, 2017, long before the red heifers came to Israel, he makes the connection between the red heifer purifying ceremony and Jesus' sacrifice. There he states that Rabbi Richman explains the tradition which links the red heifer to the golden calf. There is a tradition which connects the concept of the red heifer with the sin of the golden calf, which Israel, under the influence of the mixed multitude, committed in the desert 40 days after the revelation at Mount Sinai. And it must be read, on account of the verse which promises, "Though your sins be as scarlet." Isaiah 1 verse 18, for sin is alluded to as red. He also adds up that, from the earliest of times, Christians have made the symbolic connection between the red heifer sacrifice and the death of Christ, equating the image of Jesus' cleansing sacrifice and the sprinkling of his blood to that of the water prepared with the ashes of the red heifer. The Epistle of Barnabas, written around AD 100, made this connection. Now, what type do you think was intended when he commanded Israel that the men whose sins are complete should offer a red heifer, and slaughter and burn it, and then the children should take the ashes and place them in containers, and tie the scarlet wool around a tree? You observe again the type of the cross and the scarlet wool, and the hyssop, and then the children should sprinkle the people one by one, in order that they may be purified from their sins. Grasp how plainly he is speaking to you. The calf is Jesus. The sinful men who offer it are those who brought him to the slaughter. Epistle of Barnabas 8:1-2. Although the rehearsal purification ceremony is supposed to have been done according to Numbers 19, there is also a similar ceremony described in Deuteronomy 21, done to achieve the atonement of sins of an entire village or population, when it is found a dead core and the killer is not known. Deuteronomy 21. If someone is found slain, lying in a field in the land the Lord your God is giving you to possess, and it is not known who the killer was, 2 your elders and judges shall go out and measure the distance from the body to the neighboring towns. 3 Then the elders of the town nearest the body shall take a heifer that has never been worked, and has never worn a yoke for, and lead it down to a valley that has not been plowed or planted and where there is a flowing stream. There in the valley they are to break the heifer's neck. 5. The Levitical priests shall step forward, for the Lord your God has chosen them to minister, and to pronounce blessings in the name of the Lord and to decide all cases of dispute and assault. 6. Then all the elders of the town nearest the body shall wash their hands over the heifer, whose neck was broken in the valley. 7. And they shall declare, Our hands did not shed this blood, nor did our eyes see it done. 8. Accept this atonement for your people Israel, whom you have redeemed, Lord, and do not hold your people guilty of the blood of an innocent person. Then the bloodshed will be atoned for. 9. And you will have purged from yourselves the guilt of shedding innocent blood, since you have done what is right in the eyes of the Lord. This ceremony can be done anywhere where a dead body is found, and does not need to be done on the Temple Mount, or the Mount of Olives. I truly believe that the red heifer sacrifice performed on July 8 was done according to a ceremony that enacted both Numbers 19 and Deuteronomy 21, and was done in order to make atonement for all Israel's sins and bring their Messiah. But contrary to this some Israelite belief, this sacrifice is not a way of coming with terms with God. This sacrifice was predicted in late June and posted a video on June 28, later on July 7, stating that there would be a sacrifice in July 9th. Despite the sacrifice having been done July 8 instead. If we look at the Numbers 19, we can see that the priest who performs the ceremony will be unclean until the evening. After that, the priest must wash his clothes and bathe himself with water. He may then come into the camp, but he will be ceremonially unclean till evening. So the priest is to be clean the next day, in this case on July 9th. This accurate prediction was made using the time periods shown in Daniel's and Revelation books. Knowing the close coming of the Feast of Trumpets Day and its possible relation to the rapture, I tried to make the calculations in order to fit my previous narrative, and see if I could predict the day of the red heifer sacrifice, according to Revelation 12:6. The woman fled into the wilderness to a place prepared for her by God, where she might be taken care of for 1,260 days. Despite many seeing this woman as the same that later is said to 14, be given the 2 wings of a great eagle, so that she might fly to the place prepared for her in the wilderness, where she would be taken care of for a time, times and half a time, out of the serpent's reach. I understood that these are different women, believers or churches, which face different destinies. The first is taken to a place prepared for her by God. That relates to what Jesus told his disciples when he said that he would prepare a place for them in heaven where there are many mansions. If the rapture was to occur in September 22th as I thought it might, the woman was to be taken to heaven or raptured during 1260 days. Back in Daniel 12 verse 12 we read that, "Blessed are those who wait and remain until the end of the 1335 days. So I did something simple. I add 1,260 days to the possible day of the rapture, September 22th, and back count 1,335 days, because those who are not to be raptured will stay for a longer period. Anyone can and will certainly argue that it is kind of an arbitrary decision, or interpretation, but as we all know there is no consensus about Bible interpretations. So I did what my reasoning told me to, and deeply inside I felt that God was leading me, but that is just a personal belief. Doing just that I came to the prediction of the red heifer sacrifice on July 9th, back in June 27th, and posted a very simple video on YouTube on June 28th, just to have some evidence of the date, when I did the prediction, and waited for something to happen, and it did happen. Many will stick to the official narrative, that the red heifer death was just a rehearsal, and it may be so. But you must understand that if I'm right, there will be the rapture on September 22th, or 23th, depending where in the world you are, and what time it will happen, and that we are already in the 1,290 days foretold by Daniel. I also believe that the red dragon referred as a sign in Revelation 12:3. Then another sign appeared in heaven, an enormous red dragon with 7 heads, and 10 horns and 7 crowns on its heads. Is the blood moon of September 7th, and it will mark the appearance of the antiChrist or the beast, as it is said to have the same 7 heads and 10 horns. According to my interpretations that can be seen in this event will then bring the revelation of the antichrist or of the beast. According to my beliefs and research that are shared by some others, The anti is he will probably assume his power as a true king at, or soon after the blood moon, or the beast, which is the fourth kingdom, that I believe is the European Union, will show its true manipulative and dictatorial intentions. We will see if I'm right.